I'm Paula, welcome back to my channel. I upload weekly vlogs every Sunday and weekly chatty videos every Wednesday. This is the second in the series of my chatty videos and I thought I'd do something a bit different today. Last week I did my favourites for September and this week I'm going to be talking about my favourite true crime documentaries. Now if you know me in real life, you'll know I'm a huge fan of true crime. I like reading about it, listening to podcasts, watching like documentaries, watching YouTube videos. I don't really know what draws me to it as such. I mean, I really like the psychology behind why things happen, what led to it happening, and the kind of looking into the background of the person that did the crime and as to what things happened in their life to lead them up to doing that. That's the kind of bit that really interests me. I'm not really into the actual necessarily gory details of the crime itself, it's more the kind of lead up to it. I know a lot of people are interested in sort of crime scenes and the actual like physically seeing what happened to someone and that kind of thing, which isn't really something which interests me as such, although that comes with part and parcel, I suppose, of the whole story itself. I've got my trusty cat notebook here that's got my kind of notes to remind me of different details to do with the documentaries themselves, because some of these I haven't seen for quite a long time, so I kind of had to have a bit of a refresher. So I've got 5 here, although there are plenty others that I've seen that I've really enjoyed. So I might sort of do a part 2 and a part 3 or something at different stages, because yeah, I like talking about them anyway, so any excuse. 4 are classic documentaries and 1 is like a documentary style TV programme. I wanted to include it in this list because although it's not technically true crime and it's not technically a documentary, it's the sort of programme that I always think about when I think of programmes within this genre. So the first one I want to talk about is a programme called Autopsy, The Last Hours Of. Now there's been about 4 series of this programme and I know that they do a US version as well. Every episode covers a different celebrity death. The ones that they've chosen are particularly like controversial or sudden or quite tragic. The sort of people that they cover on this programme are Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Robin Williams, Brittany Murphy, Elvis Presley, really high profile. If you haven't heard of it or you haven't seen it, the format essentially is that a pathologist, and there's 2 a pathologist, Dr. Richard Shepherd, and there's also, I need to refer to my notes, there's also Dr. Jason Payne James who features on this programme, but it's mostly Dr. Richard Shepherd, who's actually involved in analysing Princess Diana's autopsy. He essentially narrates you through the programme and he talks through the autopsy results as he's looking at them, and he also gives his diagnosis on why he thinks that person died, or he might notice something in the autopsy that shows something different to what was diagnosed or what was kind of mentioned as the actual cause of death. And whilst he's talking through those, you see kind of clips of an actor who's playing the celebrity will kind of play out the last few days or last hours of the celebrity's life. They are quite squeamish. It doesn't show anything squeamish. Anything it shows to do with the body is like in an animation form, so you don't see anything dodgy. So I'm not a fan of that either. So the next one I'm going to talk about is a programme called The Keepers. Now this is a very different, very shocking, hard to watch actually documentary. It's very, very good though, and I would still recommend it for sure for anyone to watch, but it's not an easy watch. It's not like a light-hearted programme just to sort of watch now and again or to watch whilst you're doing something else. You will get gripped and brought into it, and it's also this sort of programme that you will not stop thinking about afterwards. Like, this literally played on my mind for weeks. It essentially follows the story of the unsolved murder of Sister Kathy Sesnick. Sister Kathy worked at the Archbishop Keogh High School in Baltimore. She was a very young, very fun, very involved sister who worked at the school. She was very close to a lot of her students and she got her students in a slightly different way to the other sisters who are a lot older. She kind of tried to get more involved in their personal lives and just be more of a friend to them. The reason I'm saying that is that's quite key to some of the things that get revealed in the documentary. She went missing in the late 60s, I think it was like November 1969, and her body was found in the early part of 1970. The programme kind of starts with 2 former students who have got together and have decided to investigate the murder. That is what is the theme running all the way through, that is what the women are looking into. But it's all the things that get revealed and all the kind of stories and shared stories about what happened at that school during those years is what makes it really shocking and kind of open up lots of different doors, if you like, to different things that could have happened, looking into different possibilities of who might have done it, of who might have been involved. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a really good watch, and it turns out to be about a lot more than just an unsolved murder case, put it that way. Okay, the third one I'm going to talk about is called The Staircase. This is also on Netflix, but I think it's also on Amazon Prime and Now TV, but I watched it on Netflix. This follows the trial of Michael Peterson for killing his wife, Kathleen Peterson. So the reason it's called The Staircase is because Michael Peterson found his wife, Kathleen Peterson, at the bottom of the staircase, allegedly. It was December 2001. He and his wife, this is his story, he and his wife Kathleen were having drinks outside by the pool. They live in a massive mansion in Durham, North Carolina. They were having drinks outside by the pool one evening. She had to go in early because she had work the next day, so she goes inside. He's still out by the pool. He then follows her in about half an hour later. Well, not follows her in, but he then goes in himself about half an hour later and finds her on the bottom of the stairs of the back staircase of their house, absolutely covered in blood. He phones 911 and says, "I found my wife, she's fallen down the stairs, please come and help me." And apparently at the point where he found her, she was still alive. So then the emergency services come out, and when they come out, by the time they come out, she's actually dead. The reason it goes to trial is because no one actually believes that this was an accident. He's saying that he found her, she must have fallen down the stairs. He is adamant that she fell, nothing to do with him. But yeah, the police don't see it that way and charge him for murder because he was the only person in the house. She was absolutely covered in blood, and they don't see how, you know, she could have just fallen down the stairs and died. Like with the other ones, I'm not going to say too much to give too much away, but the programme essentially is following him and his defence team, putting a case together as to why he didn't kill her, and proving it was trying to prove it was just an accident, versus the prosecution who are saying he must have killed her. There was too much blood for her to have just fallen down the stairs, and her autopsy shows that she had several lacerations in the back of her head, proving that it wasn't just her falling down the stairs, that there was actually some damage to the back of her head. And they're saying that he hit her with, I think it was a fire poke. It's a very interesting one. It's a little bit odd in the fact that he goes on trial for the murder of his wife, and he instantly has a film crew filming a documentary for him. That's the bit I can't get my head around. It may have been that they approached him and said, "Oh, you know, this is happening to you, we want to make a documentary about it," and he thought, well, it'll bring awareness to the case, it'll bring awareness to my wife dying. It may have been that he thought of those things, but I can't help but wonder if there was money involved there for, I don't know, you know, when certain people just, if they want to make money out of everything, that to me seems a little bit off. But then again, I suppose he had to pay for his defence team, and if they were offering money for a documentary. Very interesting theories in there. It's a bit of an odd one. I don't know whether I personally think he did it or not. I don't think she fell down the stairs. I think there's too much blood, and her other injuries that you get to hear about in the programme just don't really coincide with her falling down some stairs. Only them two really know what happened. Talk about it's a little bit different. The title of the documentary is Aileen Wuornos, Life and Death of a Serial Killer. And it's a Nick Broomfield documentary. I think it aired on BBC years ago. It follows the last year of Aileen Wuornos' life. She was known as America's first female serial killer. She ended up killing 7 men between 1989 and 1990, and was caught and charged with murder in 1991, I believe. She actually confessed to killing all 7 men and was sentenced to death, and I think she had like 6 death sentences. Was finally executed in October 2002. Nick Broomfield made 2 documentaries about Aileen. The first one was The Selling of a Serial Killer, which followed different ways that certain people were making money out of her and subsequently selling programs and all sorts about her life when she was initially put in prison. And the second documentary, I have seen both of them, the second documentary kind of follows her in the last year of her life, where she comes to accept what's happening to her and just wants to die. She originally said she wasn't guilty and that she was threatened with rape, and that's why she killed those men in self-defense. But then in the last year she turns her story around and says, no, I killed them on purpose. I need to be killed, I need to be sentenced to death. What's really interesting about the difference between the 2 programmes is how different Aileen is in the first documentary versus the second documentary. Now, bearing in mind the second documentary follows her in her last year of her life, so by that point she's been on death row for 10 years, She's a very different person, a very different character. You can tell she's just absolutely exhausted. She's just given up the fight. She just wants to die. She would rather die than be kept in the condition she's been kept in, which obviously she's had to have dealt with for the last 10 years. Nick actually interviews her several times throughout the programme, and he actually gives her last interview when she's been interviewed at Florida State Prison the night before her execution. She actually asks for him to interview her. Filming of this is going really, really wrong today. Oh, the sun's just come streaming through. We just had to close the curtains. Oh God. It's a real mixed bag, that documentary. She had an absolutely horrific childhood, which is kind of talked about in the documentary, and I've subsequently read up quite a lot about her as well, because her story just interested me so much. She was abused from a very early age. She would sell her body to people at school. Her mum and dad gave her up for adoption. Her grandfather then adopted her and subsequently abused her. Yeah, she had so much going on. She was pregnant, I think, at 13, or it might have been 14, and was forced to give the baby away. She then was thrown out of her grandfather's house. She then started to hitchhike her way around the country. She called herself the hitchhiking hooker. It just makes you think a lot about the other side of it, which isn't necessarily the kind of case and the side of the victim, but also the side of the actual person that committed the crime and what they have gone through and that kind of thing. Yes, I get that they've, like, certain serial killers, or probably all of them really, have had a really awful childhood, which has often led them to then go on to commit those horrendous crimes, because something must have happened to you in childhood, in pretty much all cases, surely, for you to actually go ahead and do things like that to people. But lots of people, on the other hand, who've also had awful childhoods, have gone on to be amazing, inspirational, hardworking people. I'm always in two minds, but I also appreciate that there's two sides to every story, and in this case, I think what makes me less angry and more sympathetic towards Aileen is the fact that the people she killed weren't particularly nice people. They weren't like innocent victims. They were all awful. Maybe that's a bit of a controversial thing to say. Essentially, the documentary is really good. It's well worth the watch, and it brings up a lot of interesting points, and very interesting also how she was treated differently being a female. The final one I want to talk about is a programme I saw on Channel 4 called Life and Death Row: The Mass Execution. This particular one was treated as a documentary in its own right. It's like its own series, own like mini series off of the main series. This particular series follows the lives of 8 men whose executions were fast-tracked over only 10 days in 2017. So over those 10 days, all of those 8 men were scheduled to be executed. And the reason behind this was because the governor of Arkansas had a limited supply remaining of a certain lethal drug. I think it was called midazolam. So it was the lethal drug they used to give lethal injections, and he only had a certain amount of supply left, and he had to use it up. So he scheduled for these 8 men to kind of all of a sudden be executed in this very short time frame just to use up this drug. Each episode follows 2 or 3 of the men, and it essentially kind of talks about the crimes they committed. So you hear about the crime, you hear from the victim's family, and then you hear from the actual serial killer and the serial killer's family. What was interesting about it is not all the men were actually executed. Some of them actually were passed, so they didn't actually get executed. They remain on death row, but they weren't actually executed during that time, and go to trial again to see if they are due to be executed again later on. Anyway, they were my top 5 true crime documentaries. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I have a new weekly vlog coming on Sunday. It's a funny one this week. I've already been editing it. It's a funny one, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite documentaries are. Do you enjoy true crime? Are you a little bit obsessed with true crime like I am? Please tell me if I'm not alone on that. See you soon. Bye. I can go back,